You've mentioned like awesome places like Paris. What's your favorite spot that you've performed outside the US?
If it's just with performing, like audiences, I would
Mm-hmm.
say Glasgow was probably one of the best audiences I've ever had. Sydney, Australia was one of the best audiences I've ever had. And then I go to London at least once or twice a year, except for this year, because it's some of the best audiences I've ever had. So those are like my top for like just purely based on people that get my dark,
Mm.
fucked up sense of humor. Like that's to me, those are like, I don't know, kindred spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Then for just traveling, like, oh man, I loved Japan. Japan is
Mm.
one of the coolest places and I want to go back. I love Thailand, again, one of the coolest places and I want to go back. Netherlands is everywhere in the Netherlands. I've performed in like 5 cities now in the Netherlands. It's the
Mm.
prettiest place I've ever been and I want to go back. So there's places that like I I try to add at least one new country a year. I technically snuck it in for this year because
Mm-hmm.
I had never been to France and I'd never been to Paris. Um, but I don't know. I try to go to places that, like, I've performed in Pakistan. Like I've performed in places people would never. And like some of them are military tours, but Pakistan was an independent tour for Pakistani people. Awesome shows, incredible
Mm.
country. Like to me, I want to go to places that kind of challenge me as an American, challenge
Mm.
me as a comedian. Um, they might not be the best shows. They might even just, it might be bad shows, but great experiences. Like I'm trying to think, I have a joke called Fuck Finland, which is about trying to get into Finland.
Yeah.
That if it's so funny because I'll get hate comments, but you can tell they just read the title.
Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, it's a joke. Like
Yeah.
nobody
Yeah.
says fuck Finland. Everybody says fuck America. That's why the title itself in my mind is hilarious because
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Nobody says fuck Finland. And
Yeah.
then I even put a subtitle just so people understood like this is technically a joke about organization
Yeah.
and shitty airport experiences. It's almost not about Finland.
Mm-hmm.
Finland just happened to be the country that wasn't letting me in because of my passport. So to me, like, and I did a festival. I ended up getting there. I missed one show because of my passport issues, but it was fun. They were nice, but like it wasn't rewarding shows. Like Finland is such a reserved country that it felt like a Zoom show. Like they would be like, and I would be, and then they would come up to me afterwards and they'd be like, that was amazing. And I'm like, tell your face. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that was the longest hour of my life. So there's certain countries that just like, I don't know, Glasgow, like I was telling like suicide jokes in Glasgow and they were like, I was having applause breaks and I was
Oh man.
like, most people stare at me like this is amazing. Or like I did a suicide joke in Norway like 4 years ago and I got
Mm-hmm.
an applause break and and like, they have like the highest rate of suicide. So it
Mm-hmm.
was a risk,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I like dark sense of, I'm a sad, I tell funny, sad jokes.
Your most popular video that I've seen, which is on YouTube, is a skit of you talking about feminist sex positions. So, which is a hilarious joke for those who have not seen it, and definitely look it up. So, how'd you come up with that joke?
So it honestly, I'm one of 5 kids. I'm the second oldest of 5. And at the time, my little sister now lives in California, but at the time she lived in Brooklyn, not too far from me. And my brother lived with me for a couple of months, and then he ended up living with my sister a couple stops away for a couple of months. And we're all really close. We're the middle kids. We're all really close. And I went over to visit my brother and sister, and I had keys to her place. So I walk into her place, and my brother is like, he's probably one of the funniest people I know, but he's telling one of these like street jokes, like one of these like, and I describe it in the bit, but he's telling one of these like sexual act jokes, like you do this and then this happens and then that
Mm-hmm.
hilarious. But I kind of was like turned off by it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I taught you better. Like you're
Yeah. Yeah.
funnier than this. And
Yeah.
I taught you better. And he was like 19 at the time. And I found myself not only not thinking it was funny, but like not being disappointed in my brother, but just a little like, why is this bothering me? And I
Mm-hmm.
remember for weeks being like, why am I still thinking about why this makes me angry? And I
Mm-hmm.
kind of just sat with it. And finally I came to the conclusion. I was like, oh, because those like street sex jokes always, they're not, they're just hurting women. Like they're never, it's never like sexual for the woman. It's always something that like pranks the woman, embarrasses the woman, demoralizes the woman. It just made me sad. I was like, to me, that's not humor. That's literally abuse masked as a joke. Almost like when you say something where you'd be like, that's your face. And they'll be like, dude, that hurt my feelings. They're like, no, I'm making a joke. Well, how is it a joke if it hurts me? And like, I get that also people can hear my jokes and be hurt by it, but I'm not pinpointing it exactly at you. And I do think things need to be taken with a grain of salt. So I get that people can be sensitive, and I also get that people need to be less sensitive. It's a very like weird line to cross. But for me, all these sexual street jokes were always attacking women. And I thought, well, why, at the very least, I can't change what people think is funny. And I can't tell people that this isn't humor. And by all means, if that's what you find funny, you do what you want to do. But on the other spectrum of it, then I want to make jokes where women aren't the butt of the joke and women aren't the ones getting hurt in it. So my thought was, okay, if there's these sex jokes that always hurt women, I'm going to come up with feminist sex positions as a way to kind of counteract it. And it took me forever to fix it, because the first half of the joke did okay, but it just felt incomplete, and I gave up on it after about 3 months. And then my brother actually saw it and was like, oh, I like that. And I had one sexual position. He goes, what about this? And he gave me an idea. And I was like, well, if I have 2, I have to come up with 3. And that just kind of sparked it. And it very quickly became my closer. Like I couldn't follow it.
You got a chance to talk with George Carlin early in your career, and he actually gave you some advice. So what did he say that really helped you out?
So I just to clarify, I started stand-up when I was 16, but when I was 15 and knew I wanted to do stand-up, my dad encouraged me. He was like, if you want to do something, you should reach out to the people that are already doing it to get advice. So I made a list of like 40 comedians that I loved, and like truly like everyone from like George Carlin to, I don't know, like, Greg Giraldo. I mean, sadly, rest in peace, Greg Giraldo, but was like a no-name comic I wrote to him in 2001. So I made this huge list. I found people's addresses. I got their emails. I like fan groups, like whatever it was. And I wrote to all of them. And all I wrote was like, hey, I'm 15. I want to do stand-up. Do you have any advice? And 2 people got back to me. Judd Apatow. And this is Judd Apatow, pre-40-year-old virgin, pre what he is now. He had finished Freaks and Geeks, but I think Undeclared might have still been on TV. So again, I think this is like 2001. So he still had his email on his website. Like that shows you where he was. Yeah. And I wrote to him and I was like, I love your stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I want to do stand up. And he got back to me right away. And it was like, you should go to college for writing and good luck to you. And it was very nice. I've briefly met him since then, but I never was like, hey, I wrote to you when I was 15 and you wrote me back. But he's very nice. I just didn't have the heart to be like, But I found the address to George Carlin, which turned out to be, he had an office that he would go to every day and write. And I found his address online and I just wrote him and I was like, hey, I've never done stand-up, but I love it and I want to do it and I'm a fan. And if you have any advice. And my dad taught me to write it like a business letter. So it was my name, my address, my phone number, my email, letter. And then I like signed it. So he had even though I mailed it, he had all my information. And he called me when I was 15 years old and he was like, hey, is Liz there? And I was like, and I was the one that picked up the phone. I was like, yeah. And he's like, it's George Carlin. And I was like, what? Yeah. And he's like, I got your letter. And I was like, oh, man. Jesus. And so he gave me very simple advice because, even now I kind of see that it's hard to give advice to somebody that hasn't done something yet. But he's like, you got to write every day. You got to write as much as possible. And you got to get up on stage. He's like, you can't wait any longer. You got to do it now. And so he was the one that really encouraged me to like, just fucking do it. Yeah. And then he's like, you can write to me anytime. So I would write to him every couple of months. I wrote to him after I did stand up for the first time. I got profiled in the New Yorker and I sent him a copy of it and he called me to say he read it and he really enjoyed it. He gave me free tickets to come see him in New Jersey when I was living in Jersey. I got coffee with him when I was 19 and he showed me his writing process. Like he took out his computer and showed like how he structured stuff. And that had one of the biggest impacts on me as an organist, because it starts to build up. Like, how do you organize all this material? Yeah. He was just, he was one of the most generous people I've ever met, and he was a legend, and he didn't know me, and he sent me books. He signed some books for me. Just a kind person that happened to be a legend. And I would say the biggest impact he had on me is how he treated me. Like, just the fact that I could do nothing for him. I had no connection to him. I wrote him a letter, and he always got back